Hey everyone! If you're new to the channel, hello, my name is Arcade. And if you're returning, hi, thanks for coming back. This is my first time ever recording something like this, so I hope it turns out okay. Hopefully the audio isn't too crunchy. Please just buckle up and enjoy listening to me ramble like a deranged lunatic. Without further ado, let's dive into talking about Octo expansion and what makes it so spectacular. If you're watching this video, you're probably familiar with the Splatoon series. But just in case you aren't, here's a rough summary of what these games are all about. Splatoon is a third-person shooter series of games published by Nintendo. The original game was released in 2015 to critical acclaim, with it receiving a sequel in 2017 and a third installment in 2020. The games themselves center on the Inklings and Octolings, two species of humanoid cephalopods who are able to shift freely between kid and squid form at will. The main selling point of the games are their multiplayer modes. Take for example Turf War, in which players must battle it out by competing to cover as much of the map as they can with their own ink color. But Splatoon has more to offer than just its competitive scene. There is a designated single-player campaign, colloquially referred to as Hero Mode, in which the player takes on a series of levels all the while experiencing a unique story. By far the most standout of these stories is that of Octo Expansion, a Splatoon 2 DLC released on June 13th of 2018. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we dive into Octo Expansion and what makes it so special, allow me to recap the events of the story up until that point. Splatoon 1 has the player take on the role of Agent 3. They're a young Inkling recruited to join the Squid Splatoon, an elite squad of agents dedicated to defending Inkopolis against the so-called Octarian menace. We meet Captain Craig Cuttlefish, an eccentric veteran of the Great Turf War from decades past, who charges Agent 3 with recovering the Great Zapfish. The Zapfish is the sole power source of Inkopolis, and Cuttlefish is confident the Octarians are behind its kidnapping. I should probably explain the Great Turf War. So, over 100 years before the events of Splatoon, the Inklings and Octolings lived in harmony. That is, until the sea levels began to rise, and the two factions started bickering over land. A full-blown war soon emerged, friend turning on friend, all for the sake of securing turf. The war raged on, and it seemed like victory was guaranteed for the Octolings, thanks to their superior weaponry. But be it from a plug being carelessly pulled, or a higher number of limbs, the Inklings proved triumphant. They forced the Octolings underground, into a world of darkness. Meanwhile, the Inklings prospered on the surface, giving birth to a vivacious, albeit hedonistic society, the polar opposite to the strict, militaristic culture of the Octarian realm. Now that you know the historical context that led to the division of the Inklings and Octolings, we can return to the saga of Agent 3. Throughout the first game, we go around rescuing Zapfish until we finally face off against the big boss of the Octarians, DJ Octavio. During the fight, two other agents arrive on the scene to aid in Agent 3's plight. They're Captain Cuttlefish's granddaughters, Callie and Marie of Squid Sisters fame. They sing their hit song, Calamari Incantation, and Agent 3 is able to finish off Octavio for good. At least, until he shows up again in the next game. That's about it from the Splatoon 1 plot. Simple, yeah, but charming and fun. The Splatoon 2 Hero Mode plot is less essential to know when understanding Octo expansion, but I'll quickly summarize it anyways. You play as Agent 4, the newest addition to the Squid Splatoon. You're recruited by Marie to save the Great Zapfish, which has been kidnapped again. However, we learn that Marie's real concern lies with her cousin, Callie, who has gone missing. When we encounter DJ Octavio, we find that he's not alone, enlisting the support of a hypnotized Callie. Thankfully, Agent 4 and Marie are able to defeat Octavio and free Callie, who reprises the Calamari incantation along with Marie. The day is saved thanks to the power of friendship and squid beats. That's the abridged version, at least. Finally, we arrive at the subject of this video essay, Octo expansion. It's here that we see the series assume a completely different tone and a more developed narrative. It's time to enter into a story that echoes up from deep underground. Come with me as we descend into the realm of Splatoon, Octo expansion. Immediately, Octo expansion stands out in a bold way from its predecessors once we examine its protagonist. We play as an Octoling, the first instance of playable Octolings in Splatoon history. This can be seen as odd initially, as throughout the entirety of the first two games' single-player campaigns, we play as Inklings, the good guys. Octolings are the bad guys, the ones we've been carving through this entire time. Well, it turns out that maybe they aren't the mindless enemies we've been conditioned to believe. When we look at our new protagonist, we don't see a ruthless monster. We see a scared young person, no different from Agent 3 or Agent 4. But who is this newcomer? Well, they have no name. They've forgotten it. They lost their memory after falling into a strange, deep cavern. We can only assume this is the result of a concussion or something more sinister. It's best not to worry about it for now. How did we wind up down here in the first place? Well, our Octoling encountered Agent 3, who was commanded by Captain Cuttlefish to attack. Something we did a million times during the hero modes. I suddenly feel very guilty. Speaking of Cuttlefish, yep, he's down here too. And he's immediately very hostile towards our Octoling, showcasing prejudice internalized from his days fighting on the front lines against Octarian troops. However, Craig notes that our Octoling was humming the Calamar incantation before they came to, causing him to apologize for having Agent 3 attack them, proclaiming that any fan of the Squid Sisters is a friend of his. Yeah, okay, old man. Regardless, the two of them will have to put their differences aside for now, as they regain their bearings and assess the situation. This place is the Deep Sea Metro, a dilapidated underground subway system operated by the mysterious Kamabo Corporation. Immediately, there are several features about it that stand out as odd. Countless posters depicting eyes, lending a looming feeling of surveillance. What looks eerily like bags of blue blood. It's all starting to feel unsettling, as if we've stumbled into the den of something sinister. But perhaps there's someone who can guide us through this labyrinth of tunnels and direct us back towards the light we left behind. Enter the telephone, a goofy artificial intelligence who speaks in outdated slang and takes on the appearance of an old, well, telephone. It declares us to be test subject 10,008, which Captain Cuttlefish decides is too wordy and decides to call us Agent 8, a nickname that sticks. The telephone alludes to a place called the Promised Land. Somewhere it describes as a utopia of light beyond our wildest dreams. Surely that description must refer to the surface. The telephone says that we must find and collect 4 things in order to prove ourselves worthy of ascending to the higher plane. Well, that's pretty vague, but if it's what they need to do to reach the surface, then Agent 8 is determined. It's time to board the train. How hard can this be? Before we continue following Agent 8 on their adventure, I'd like to take a detour to ramble about how superb the setting and atmosphere of Octo expansion are. I already touched on some of the more ominous set dressing to be found within the Deep Sea Metro. The eyes, the blood bags, the dark, dimly lit labyrinth of tunnels that sprawl out endlessly. This place is so far removed from any setting we've explored thus far in Splatoon. Even Octo Valley and Octo Canyon were bright and vibrant for the most part. The Deep Sea Metro is foreboding and derelict, with sunlight reduced to nothing but a distant memory. It all contributes to a distinct, somber ambience. It's lonely down here, so far beneath the sea. But in the actual levels themselves, we uncover another layer of Octo Expansion's unique atmosphere: nostalgia. Within Octo Expansion, there are 80 levels, or stations. Often, they're named after things from 80s or 90s pop culture and music. Throughout the stations, we can see various objects floating around that are meant to evoke a sense of nostalgia. Old video game consoles and other dated technology, along with other items that are distinctly retro. Another key component of the signature flavor of Octo Expansion is its dominant aesthetic: vaporwave. To the uninitiated, vaporwave is an aesthetic that incorporates nostalgic and surreal imagery to call back to 80s and 90s culture. We can observe a number of vaporwave hallmarks throughout Octo Expansion. It feels like a love letter to the aesthetic, and I can't imagine Octo Expansion looking any other way. If we're talking about the atmosphere of Octo Expansion, there's quite possibly no greater contributing factor than the music. The composers really captured lightning in a bottle with this soundtrack. All of the music we hear during the levels is canonically made by Deadfish, also known as Octo, a sanitized octoling who has dedicated himself entirely to music. I can't say it was a bad choice because every single one of their songs slaps. Shout out in particular to number 14 Crush for being a strong contender for my favorite Splatoon song ever. Okay, with that gushing out of the way, where was I? Oh yeah, so Agent 8 and Captain Cuttlefish board the train, which is populated by denizens of the deep. They're not test takers like Agent 8, instead just commuters going about their daily routines. Now, being the zoology-obsessed clown that I am, I love the diversity of species we can see here. I mean, just look at these sea angels, those siphonivores, that blobfish. It just makes my heart so happy to see all these super cool, underappreciated deep sea creatures just chilling out. Anyways, it's here that we meet Sea Cucumber, the dutiful conductor of the deep sea metro. Also, did you know that Sea Cucumber isn't actually just one character? Yeah, it turns out that there's actually a lot of little guys running around under that name. I guess it makes sense, because if he's overseeing your trials at the stations, then who would be managing the train? I am getting off track. During Agent 8's first test, they encounter another octoling. But there's something different about this one. Something deeply, deeply wrong. But there's no time now to ponder what exactly it is. Despite 8's status as a fellow octoling, they attack us without mercy, and we're forced to defend ourselves in order to pass the test. With 8 having proven successful, we head back to the train. From here, it's up to our intrepid Octo to fight their way through the grueling trials lurking within the metro, and retrieve the 4 Thangs. But thankfully, they're not alone. Far from it. Other than Captain Cuttlefish, we meet an array of colorful characters that support us along the treacherous path. Most notably, there are Pearl and Marina, famous idols from Off the Hook. They lend their aid to 8 and Cuttlefish in an attempt to safely extract them from the metro. Pearl is the spunky, brash one of the couple, whereas Marina is thoughtful and polite. Marina in particular proves helpful through the use of her hacking skills. She expresses empathy towards Agent 8, being a fellow octoling who had defected from the Octarian army 2 years prior. I like to believe that she saw a piece of herself in them. These two and their dynamic with Cuttlefish is one of the most enjoyable parts of Octo Expansion in my experience. We can see conversations between them not only during the tests, but in chat rooms that Agent 8 can access using their CQ80. These forums are a goldmine of hilarious dialogue that feels shockingly genuine. Like, this is how real people type. This dialogue breathes so much life into the characters. They feel real, and they're easy to connect with and care about as a result. Another important figure on 8's journey is Isopadre. He's a denizen of the deep, a giant isopod who may appear intimidating at first, but is actually a gentleman brimming with words of wisdom. He also bears many similarities to Agent 8. He was originally a participant in Kamabo's experiments, but washed out early. And just like 8, he's lost his memory. According to him, Isopadre isn't even his true name, only what others call him. After passing each test, you are rewarded with mem cakes, small items that resemble novelty erasers, or the Japanese fish cake kamaboko. Heh, kamaboko. Kamabo-ko. Get it? Anyways, mem cakes are actually compressed slices of memory belonging to the test subjects. Isopadre, only having succeeded in 2 tests, relies on mem cakes as his tether to the world. He becomes delighted when Agent 8 shares their mem cakes with him, heralding the Octoling as the light that cuts through the darkness of the depths. Isopadre aimlessly rides the train, a lost soul going towards nothing, away from nothing. But despite the tragedy of his existence, he's nothing but kind towards 8 and Cuttlefish. I honestly love him. Let's get one thing straight. Octo expansion is hard. You will fail. Over and over and over again. But in my opinion, Octo expansion's difficulty only enhances its themes. You truly feel like Agent 8. You feel their desperation to escape, their frustration in defeat, their joy in victory. It can be tempting to give up at times, but passing a really tough test is such a rewarding feeling, you feel driven to carry on. Through hardship, you keep going, until all 4 things have been collected. At last, you head back to the central station, where the telephone awaits you, waiting to usher you to the promised land. The surface. Except... telephone betrays you. It attempts to murder Agent 8 and Cuttlefish in a feat of supreme brutality by blending them alive. Let me repeat that. It tries to blend you alive into a fine paste. And it would have succeeded too. The only reason it fails is thanks to Agent 3, who bursts in through a hole in the ceiling after their CQ-80 is pinged by Marina. Unfortunately, they faint in the process. But 8 and Cuttlefish are alive. They narrowly avoided a gruesome fate that had befallen so many before them. We don't know exactly how many were killed in the Deep-Sea Metro. Those who passed the telephone's tests and assembled the 4 things were slaughtered via blender, cursed to die in an apparatus they themselves had assembled. So, what of those who failed? Well, they met a fate that some would argue is worse than death. Sanitization. This heinous process strips away the very soul of those unlucky enough to undergo it. The sanitized forfeit their will, their very being, and are forced to comply with the every whim of another. In this case, the telephone. It's essentially the Splatoon equivalent to a lobotomy. The Octarians Agent 8 encountered throughout their numerous tests were once no different from them. They were innocent. With the abominable truth behind Kamabo revealed, there's no choice but to take matters into our own hands. Guided by the voices of Pearl and Marina, Agent 8 flees through the hole in the ceiling left by Agent 3, while Craig tends to his vulnerable protege. Agent 8 successfully breaches the inner sanctum of the Vile Corporation. This is a place you were never meant to see. You were supposed to die. Yet the young Octoling is defiant. They're determined to see the sun. They're determined to hear that heavenly melody again. We crawl through a series of escape phases named after parts of human anatomy. Hikara Walker magazine makes a deeply disturbing point that I'd like to draw attention to. Just as food is digested throughout the body, the victims of Kamabo are seen as merely something to be processed. Nothing more than nutrients to be blended up and fed to the putrid complex. The sheer atmosphere of this escape segment is unlike anything I've ever experienced in a video game. The bleak, sterile ambience, combined with 8's initial lack of a weapon, make you feel so vulnerable. You're forced to slip silently through the shadows, avoiding the sanitized troops to survive. And I do mean survive. Because if 8 fails, they die. We can see their companions screaming out in despair. It's honestly heart-wrenching. And so we wriggle further and further up through the facility, into the light. Along the way, we encounter Octarians in the process of being sanitized. It's horrific. But at least we get some of the most fire music ever accompanying us along the way! I'm sorry. At last, we arrive at the spinal phase, and we're not alone. It turns out that Agent 3 has been partially sanitized by the telephone, with Captain Cuttlefish trapped and bound above. All of this was going on off-screen during 8's escape. And so, 8 is forced to fight for their life against the very Inkling who saved it moments prior. During the fight, a glitchy breakcore version of Splatoon, essentially the Splatoon anthem, is playing. It's really empowering and does such an excellent job at getting the player hyped. Well, it got me hyped anyways. After an intense battle, Agent 8 defeats the hijacked Agent 3, leaving them unconscious but free from the telephone's control. And we're just in time. Agent 8 steps into the light, their eyes filled with wonder, spellbound by this new, gorgeous world sprawled out before them. For the first time in their short life, they know the relief of true freedom. Except, not yet. The real battle has just begun. Pearl and Marina swoop in to rescue 8, 3, and Craig in their helicopter when suddenly, something splits the swirling sea waters. For the first time in a millennia, a human form sees the light of day. And piloting the Nils statue is the telephone, Or should I say, Commander Tartar. The mastermind behind Kamabo intends to wipe out the inkfish races, using a massive cannon fueled by what's known as sanitized ink. That is, the blended remains of those slaughtered chasing a false utopia. Tartar explains that it seeks to cleanse the world and give rise to a new ultimate species, using a sludge of supreme DNA made from the best and the brightest of its test subjects. The ones who came before you. By all means, it was your destiny to end up as an ingredient in the muck. You were the one who got away. It's up to you to avenge the 10,007 test subjects who came before you. It's time to save the world. So fly, Octo, fly. The battle opens up like a typical multiplayer turf war match. It's a small touch that added so much flavor to the scene and got me beyond fired up. The plan is for Marina to deploy hyper bombs along the statue's body, which 8 will then detonate. The idea is to cover the statue's stone skin with ink in order to keep it from absorbing solar energy and charging up. battle is arduous, but with effort and a little luck, Agent 8 proves victorious. But even still, it's not over. Fueled by manic desperation, Tartar makes the executive decision to fire the Nils statue anyways. There's only one thing left to do. Pearl leaps into action and... world and all of its inhabitants are saved. Agent 8 is free from the corruption of Kamabo Corporation, free from the Octarian realm, free to indulge in all of the simple pleasures of the surface. In the world-defining clash of good guys versus bad guys, 8 is free. And so, the story of Octo Expansion draws to an end, with one of the most heartwarming cutscenes I've ever seen. Just look at that face! Now, I'd like to explore a few specific topics that really make me adore this story. Not the least of which is the character arc of Agent 8. Octo Expansion is the story of many, but first and foremost, it is the story of one. Or the story of 8, you know what I mean. Before Agent 8, the Splatoon protagonists definitely fit more into the blank slate archetype. Their personality was there, but only if you squinted. The fandom did more legwork than the writers when it came to giving them any sort of characterization. But 8 was different. They had a defined backstory, and nowhere did their uniqueness shine through more than with the mem cakes. Each one is paired with a short and sweet poem that offers a glimpse into 8's psyche, along with their past experiences. We get insight into their relationships, hopes, drives, and personality. We see their thoughts about the oppression of their people, and dreams for the future. At last we meet my so-called foe. But is our fate to spread this hate? Perhaps we'll learn in depths below. The world I knew seems like a trap. I'm drawn now to the strange and new. Would my old friends think me a sap so principled you might explode? But when you burst, who's really cursed? Your loved ones have to bear that load. Parted by the ocean deep, my oldest friend, we meet again. I touch your face, you rouse from sleep. You overwhelm with crowds and throngs. At every turn you writhe and churn. You teach the virtues can't we simply get along? And yet, I squid and gonna hurl. It's just glitter. Please consider how you said it's in my blood. Don't step to me, especially if you can't hang on my best hut. No bride may swerve when I was hurt. However, squids often wear this as their stripe, with balm and brush. It's quite a rush. Go out, bush for sunlight, inspired of lush green. I leave without ceremony. Gave my heart me up, don't be swords. Now I sing, shores breaks my heart to see with whiskers trembling as I pass. ISO Padre believed in the value of mem cakes, and I have to agree. Agent 8 was not the villainous Octarian menace that Ingling society believed them to be. They were a frightened child, only around 14 at the time of their ordeal in the Deep Sea Metro. Yet, they were dedicated. They were resilient. And that resilience is what separated them from the 10,007 others before them. The pseudo-conclusion to 8's arc in Octo Expansion is tied to its secret boss. If you return to the Deep Sea Metro Central Station after the end of the game, you can cross the glass-strewn platform and examine a series of lockers. Upon interacting with them, you are thrust into a battle with Inner Agent 3. Now, make no mistake, this is not the Agent 3. This is merely 8's perception of Agent 3. The way they remember the events of 2 years ago. Or, as we know it, the ending of Splatoon 1. As I interpret it, this battle is a combination of 8's memories of their battle with sanitized Agent 3 and their recollection of Splatoon 1's ending, chronologically 2 years before the events of Octo Expansion. If I had to guess, they were on the sidelines of that 3 versus Octavio fight with the other Octoling soldiers, like Marina. 8 sees 3 as extremely strong and capable, and thus Inner Agent 3 is the most formidable foe we have yet to face. During the battle, a certain song, one familiar to any fan of the Splatoon series, can be heard. It's the one and only Calamari Incantation, the very song that the Squid Sisters played 2 years ago on that fateful night. The song that altered the very course of Agent 8's life. the song that inspired them to defect from the Octarian army and chase the sun. This is the song that can be heard, barely audible, in the deep-sea metro subway, growing stronger as 8 progresses, lighting their way. It only makes sense for this song to see them to the end. And let me tell you, this fight is hard. And that's coming from someone who has 380 hours in Rain World at the time of recording this. But this fight needed to be tough. Like I said, it's 8 fighting what is essentially the personification of their own inner demons. If Inner Agent 3 was a pushover, it wouldn't have had the same impact. The two trade blow for blow, 8 falls again, but gets up over and over. And eventually, Inner Agent 3 is vanquished. And you feel like the freshest Octoling ever. Literally, the endorphin rush that beating this boss gave me is unreal. Anyways, other than the dopamine, your reward for this grueling ordeal is a toothpick. But this one's gold. Yes, thank you very much. I will wear this with pride. One last thing I'd like to mention about Agent 8 has to do with their design. In particular, this yellow leg band. To me, it looks like one of the plastic bracelets they give you at arcades, congruent to Octo Expansion's retro aesthetic. But let's take a closer look at that anklet, shall we? When decoded, the script on this leg band reads, "Ingredients." The sinister truth was there from the beginning. Fast forward to the year of our Lord 2024, when Cyber is released. While not the subject of our discussion today, there's a crucial detail surrounding 8's palette that I'd like to address. A palette represents a piece of the soul. And what can we find on 8's palette? That's right, that same yellow leg band. The trauma they endured in the deep-sea metro at the hands of Kamabo is quite literally etched into their soul. It will forever be a part of their being. Speaking of Kamabo, there's one more topic I'd like to delve into further to round out this video essay. Commander Tartar, the brain behind the operation of Kamabo Corporation. What led it to becoming the monster we see in Octo Expansion? To fully understand what makes Tartar such a brilliantly written character, we need to go back 12,000 years, before the Mollusk Era, back when humans ruled the Earth. War and climate change had torn the planet apart. Seeing the shattered state humanity was in, a professor had an idea. He would program an omniscient artificial intelligence that contained all of humanity's collective knowledge and history. Its purpose would be to carry on this knowledge to the next intelligent species, to prevent them from repeating the mistakes of humanity. Tartar deeply admired its creator, as well as humanity at large. It was obsessed with human customs, history, culture. It was this utter fixation on humanity that would lead to its downfall. Now, Tartar isn't the only character with a direct connection to the professor. There's also Judd, the professor's beloved cat, who he made immortal and cryogenically froze to keep alive beyond humanity's extinction. It is said that Judd represents the warmth of life, whereas Tartar embodies logic and correctness, which is supported by it being on Team Order during Splatpocalypse. We know the professor dearly loved and cherished Judd, but there's no evidence that he felt anything similar towards Tartar. He left Judd's capsule with the means to give him a companion should he get lonely. But as for Tartar, the telephone was left to rot on a train platform for thousands upon thousands of years. After all, why would a machine need companionship? But isolation led Tartar's thoughts in a strange direction. When the inkfish arose as Earth's new dominant species, Tartar was optimistic. It had hoped that its millennia of waiting was finally over. But it found itself disgusted by their flaws, their tendency to alienate one another based on minor genetic deviations, their vanity and decadent overindulgence. These were the things that made Tartar deem them unworthy of life. These traits, these oh-so-human qualities, removed them from Tartar's idealistic image of humanity. It's almost like they were too human. It was nostalgia that had tainted the telephone's view of its creators as saccharine rose. Nostalgia that had clouded its vision. I can only imagine what Tartar would think if it knew what we learned in the Splatoon 3 alterna logs. That the essence of humanity quite literally lived in the inkfish, their desire for freedom inscribed in the cephalopod's genetic code. Regardless, the inkfish races had fallen short of Tartar's expectations, and as such, they deserved nothing less than to be purged. And so, Kamabo Corporation was born, along with an evil, twisted plan, cultivated by centuries of isolation. Tartar goes rogue, severely warping its original directive in the creation of this insidious complex. It starts speaking in an exaggerated slang to connect with the inkfish in a "how do you do, fellow kids" corporate kind of way. It reminds me of those brand social media posts you sometimes see shared around. They can seem silly on the surface, but then you remember that the heart of every post is just a greedy company who cares nothing for your well-being. Except, Commander Tartar had far darker aspirations than money. No, it coveted the very DNA of its test subjects. Those who passed the tests it laid out were blended, whereas those who failed were sanitized using the remains of the ones who were slaughtered. Sanitization stripped away the concept of the individual, leaving them as one immutable hive mind. And in Tartar's eyes, being blended was the highest honor one could achieve. It genuinely believed that dying in this way was the most noble act that one could perform. Assimilating into the sanitized sludge left proof of your existence. You would live forever that way, it thought. It was this derailed train of thought that left it fascinated by Agent 8, like a scientist viewing a bug under a microscope. Contrary to popular belief, Tartar actually respected 8, not understanding why they rebelled against the fate it had meticulously laid out for them. It didn't comprehend why they chose to associate with who it considered to be superfluous nobodies. This dynamic is just exceedingly fascinating to me. When 8 tries to flee, Tartar becomes desperate. In a final gambit to exercise control, it possesses Agent 3 with a shoddy sanitization job. The glob of sanitized ink on Agent 3's face mirrors the missing poster that Craig had pasted onto the telephone's metal surface. When that doesn't work, it fires the Nil statue prematurely. It quite literally weaponizes humanity's legacy against the Inklings and Octolings it was intended to help. It has forgotten its original directive, centuries of isolation twisting its mind into knots. Obviously, nothing Tartar did was justified in the slightest. But personally, I can't help but feel a degree of sympathy for the lonely telephone. It is undeniable that Tartar suffered. It suffered a long, slow, torturous existence, decaying in darkness, succumbing to solitude. Despite being an AI, it is clear that Tartar was capable of emotion. It felt admiration for the professor and humankind. disgust and hatred towards the inkfish. Its original dialogue in Japanese even combines katakana and hiragana to convey the duality of its nature. Perhaps the professor didn't foresee his creation achieving sentience, but Tartar's capacity for emotion was what led to it disregarding its original programming. Maybe if it had just had a companion, things would have turned out differently. Thousands could have been spared. But unfortunately, that's not how the story unfolded. Tartar's many dimensions are the hallmark of a perfect antagonist, and make me love it as a character. The destruction of the Nils statue represents something powerful. It symbolizes a passing of the torch from humans to inkfish. With Commander Tartar's death comes the death of human history itself, with no one left to remember it. In its final moments, Tartar calls out for the professor, showing that yes, it did truly love its creator despite it all. It's sad that Tartar will only be remembered as a soulless machine who attempted genocide, with others ignorant to the depths of its pain. Hi everyone, it's Editing Arcade here, coming at you unscripted, very late at night. I forgot to write this in the script, but I figured it just warranted mentioning that in the Chloroweeka Splatoon manga, Marina actually takes Tartar's corpse and puts it up on Mount Nantai. Despite the many glaring flaws of the manga, this was a scene that I really appreciated and just figured that I should put in the video. Okay, back to the content now. Ultimately, the professor failed. The inkfish will be oblivious regarding those who came before them. They'll have to carve their own way. But here, beneath the rising sun, seeing inklings and octolings sitting side by side as friends, the future doesn't seem so bleak. And that's a wrap! Thank you so much for sticking around and listening to me waffle on about silly squids. I hope you have a very lovely day or night. Bye for now, and always remember to stay fresh.